Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my Busch Gardens Williamsburg recreation. Last time we looked at the Scotland area, building out the entire build basically for Loch Ness Monster and the surrounding buildings and rides over here. Really happy with the way this thing is shaping up. Since then, we have moved on into the Ireland area. As I mentioned before, this area is on the smaller side, probably the smallest area in the park. Not quite a whole lot to do attraction-wise. Mostly just kind of buildings with some food and shopping. And what I think used to be some theaters, show buildings in this area over here. Not entirely sure, because like I said earlier, a lot of this stuff has been closed or started to find information on it. I could probably figure out if I took the time and effort to look a little bit harder, but basically I'm just interested in making the buildings. But anyway, so here's our Ireland. Let's just start from the front here. We have our entrance gate next to our only ride in this area, the Screamin' Swing Finnegan's Flyer. This is a pretty neat Screamin' Swing in real life, though. It goes over this little body of water here. So if you happen to be facing the right way in the swings, you get to get a good view of that, which is pretty cool. So a pretty standard Screamin' Swing build from an RCT point of view. Added a lot of extra little infrastructure details to it than I normally do, which is kind of cool. You can get some pretty good views of it from Google Maps and in some photos I saw. So some little bits underneath. We have these little ramps here that go down into the water here. We've got our hydraulic pumps and all that good stuff in here. One other thing I added that I haven't seen anyone else do on a Screamin' Swing before is add some track here. This is some vertical coaster track with just the rails visible to emulate the arms of the swings. I feel like it helps sell the effect a little bit better than the single rail coaster I've used in the past. Looks maybe a little bit more realistic. And you got the two different colors, the orange and green of the arms, helps make that pop a little bit. So I thought that was pretty neat. I think I'm gonna keep it like this. Looks a little bit janky, but you know, it's gonna look a little bit janky no matter what. The rest of the Ireland area, as I mentioned, is mostly just restaurants and shops. And this is definitely a case where you've got some buildings that look pretty decent in real life, but trying to replicate them exactly in RCT is pretty tricky because, man, they look kind of ugly, especially this big one right here in the middle. We've got these like awful green windows and these like lavender walls and blue, like all sorts of different colors going on. They kind of sell it in real life. It's a bit extreme. It's a bit gaudy. But the real version looks okay. In RCT, since the details are all a lot more simplistic, it's hard to get that same point across and make it still look pretty good. So I'm not entirely happy with the buildings in this area. This one also here, same deal. It's a little bit flat, a little bit boring. In real life, it looks fine because you don't even really see it from the top view. I think I talked about this a lot before, how you really have to think about building for a viewer rather than for a guest at the park. Guests aren't going to see the roofs of the buildings. They don't care what they look like, but the player is going to be looking at all the roofs. So you need to take those views into account when designing your buildings. And when trying to go for realistic reproductions of existing buildings, you're going to run into stuff that looks a bit weird. So definitely going to come back here later on and reprofile these, maybe change some of the textures, change some of the colors, make them look a little bit more appealing to the RCT player, even if we're going to deviate a little bit from reality, and that's going to be okay. I think the same goes for a good chunk of this structure in this area. This back building, I think this is where a show building used to be for the dark ride that I mentioned before. I think you would enter over here in this little gate, which I have closed off, and there was some sort of queue or entryway for a show back here. I really don't know what's going on. I've got just a big empty blocky building over here. But fortunately, it makes for a pretty interestingly shaped building in contrast to some of the more blocky rectangular ones we've had before. This has got some nice different shapes for the footprint and for the heights of the roof and all that. So something more interesting to look at. So we have another theater over here as well. I've been playing around with making a diagonal entrance for this building. The real building I think is on a little bit of an angle, but I wanted to try to change up the shapes of the entranceway, give it a little bit more visual interest, and I think it worked out okay. We're using some monorail track for the sides, some coaster track for the roof, and from all four angles I think it turns out okay. Entryway is a little bit wide, but that's just what you're gonna have to deal with when making a diagonal entranceway. Either it's gonna be one tile, which looks too narrow, or two tiles, which is a little bit too wide. Honestly, I think it turned out all right. Got a fake exit over here as well. Got a lot of peeps leaving. It's very crowded over here, which is making people upset. So a lot of peeps leaving the park right now. That's okay. Just trying to do some traffic flow control. I don't really know where they're all trying to get to. I think every time I lay down some new path, everyone is just really excited to walk on some new path, and it gets very crowded over here in the new areas of the park. I'm not really concerned with that yet. Once we finish everything and connect all the parts together, this will dry up, so I'm not too worried about it. So at the end of the Ireland area, you have some unusual attractions, I guess. So there are some like animal enclosure areas. I didn't spend a whole lot of time over here during my visits, so I'm not 100% sure what all is going on over here. We have this section called Wolf Ridge, which I guess houses some wolves in a big enclosure, big habitat. I did throw in some of these husky cars just as stand-ins for that, just to add some movement over here. It looks a little bit silly. I don't know if I'm going to keep these. They look pretty stupid, to be honest. But I don't know. They're kind of growing on me a little bit. We have this observation area. I don't remember exactly what goes on in here either. I'm not exactly sure what goes on in here either. It might be one of those places where they could put on little demonstrations with some of the animals that they have. Probably would have been neat to get back in here and actually view the shows while I was at the park, but oh well. As far as RCT is concerned, it doesn't really matter what's in here anyway, because that's just the way it works. Just want to make sure that the buildings and foliage are sculpted the way I want. But as far as Ireland goes, that about wraps it up. We're getting close to the France area over here, where we've got Griffin and Invader. A couple more big buildings that will go on over here next. Some more foliage to tie things together. I've also got a draft layout, I guess a second draft layout for Griffin. Spent a lot of time playing around with this version. I'm pretty happy with the way this one is working. Some strange stuff going on here though, so you can see this is a wildly different version compared to what we had in episode 1 and what I've had sitting here since then. I did manage to get it where the Immelman here is on the water, almost where it's supposed to be, close to Alpengeist Cobra Roll and kind of close to Loch Ness Monsters Turnaround, so things are tied together a little bit more. Still not perfectly accurate, of course, because everything in real life is on weird angles, but you know, that's the way it works. One caveat I have with this layout that I'm not 100% happy with is the lift and station. As you can see, they are on the diagonal, so it's going to be a real pain to figure out how to build a station for this that looks remotely reasonable. Doing diagonal buildings in NCSO is very difficult. You have to use a lot of track architecture for it. Not many scenery pieces in the base game can go diagonally. There's like one or two flat walls, and that's kind of it. So we're gonna have to be creative here, figure out a shape that's gonna work out okay. I think I can hide a lot of the diagonalness here with just the right shaped building, so it's gonna take a little bit of experimentation to figure out something that works. But yeah, I am very glad that we can do the diagonal block breaks, diagonal chain lift, all that good stuff for this layout, because overall the rest of it I think turned out okay. The splashdown is in sort of a reasonable place, and the turnaround back to the station doesn't look as awkward as it used to. The splashdown is supposed to be right by a big observation area where you can walk past it, and I think there's some seating over here as well, so that's not going to be quite in the right spot. We're going to have to shift some things around in the France area to accommodate for all of this. So that's going to take some more creative liberties, I suppose, to get it all fitting together right. But that is a problem for a future episode. But as far as this goes, yeah, Ireland looking pretty solid. Like I said, lots of tweaks I want to make to these buildings later on, and I will do those eventually, but I just want to keep building, keep putting things down, getting some path in, get our first drafts of buildings in here so we can keep connecting the paths around and get the rest of the park layout looking solid. So we're making good progress and we're getting there. But we'll see how it shapes up in the future episodes. But that is going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.